That winter, I was trying to erase the painful memories of my divorce, which had ended 6 months earlier. The turbulent marriage had left me physically and mentally drained. I needed a break, a place free from the noise of the city and the whispers of gossip. Christina, my girlfriend at the time, suggested that we find a quiet place to unwind. After a few days of searching, I booked a lake house in upstate New York, a remote location, far from everything I knew. The house was described as modern yet cozy, sitting right on the lake's edge, surrounded by snow-covered forests. Since it wasn't peak travel season, most of the other houses in the area were vacant, which only added to my sense of relief. We arrived in the morning. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed a small package sitting at the front door. There was no sender's address, just a simple note that read, "Hope you have a great stay. Stay warm." Christina laughed as she opened the package. Inside was a box of matches. "People here seem really hospitable," she joked. I shrugged, assuming it was a welcome gift from the host. After unpacking and checking the house, we quickly sank into relaxation. No work calls, no disturbances, just me, Christina, a cup of hot cocoa, and the warm glow of the fireplace. Snow fell outside, making the scenery feel picture perfect. I thought this might turn out to be one of the best weeks of my life, but I was wrong. On the third night, I woke up to a strange noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind howling through the cracks, but as I listened closely, I realized it was something different. Mechanical, steady, like an engine running in the middle of the storm. I quietly got out of bed and pulled back the curtain. Outside, amidst the thick snowfall, I saw a figure moving slowly across the frozen lake. It was a snowmobile, and the driver seemed to be inching forward cautiously, as if they were unsure about the ice's stability. Then, suddenly, the snowmobile stopped. The person got off and began waving their arms, signaling for help. I shook Christina awake. "There's someone out there," I said. "It looks like they need help." She sat up groggily, still half asleep. I pointed out the window, and just then, we heard a voice calling from outside. "Thank God, someone's here!" It was a woman's voice. She was shouting, her voice strained by the cold. "I lost my little boy in the snowstorm. Please, someone help me." I didn't hesitate. If there was a child out there, he wouldn't survive long in the freezing cold. I quickly put on my thick coat, wrapped my scarf tightly, and laced up my boots. "Stay inside," I told Christina before stepping out into the icy night. The wind cut into my skin as I made my way toward the lake. The woman stood there, bundled up in a heavy fur coat, her hair neatly braided. Under the dim glow of our porch light, I could see her pale face. "Where's your son?" I asked as I got closer. She shivered, her voice quivering with fear. "He ran away. I don't know which way he went." Something felt off. I glanced around. The storm was still raging, but there were no footprints in the snow, only the tracks left by her snowmobile. "Why didn't you call the police?" I asked. She blinked, as if caught off guard by my question. Then slowly she said, "Do you still have those matches?" At that moment, I saw the corner of her mouth twitch into a subtle smile. My entire body froze. The matchbox, the mysterious package from the first day. She was the one who left it there. Before I could react, she reached into her coat and pulled out a gun. "Give me your wallet and phone," she said, her voice eerily calm. I had no choice. I handed them over immediately. After taking my belongings, she stepped back onto the snowmobile. Just before disappearing into the whiteout, she said one final sentence that chilled me more than the storm itself. "Hope you enjoy your stay." I sprinted back to the house, shouting for Christina to call the police. By the time I got inside, she was already on the phone, her hands shaking. The police arrived an hour later. They searched the area but found nothing. The fresh snowfall had erased all traces of the woman and her snowmobile. The host later confirmed that he had never sent any welcome package. No one knew who the woman was, how she knew we'd be staying there, or whether this was just a robbery, or something far more sinister. My family owned a lake house in Northern California, a peaceful retreat that we visited for a couple of weeks every summer. It was a two-story house with an attic perched on a quiet lake with a private dock. When my sister and I were kids, we would climb up into the attic with sleeping bags, pretending we were camping. There was a small window up there that overlooked the lake, and we would spend hours watching boats drift by. As we got older, the attic became less of a playground and more of a storage space. When our grandparents passed away, my parents inherited their old furniture and sentimental belongings. The attic became cluttered with heirlooms that my parents didn't have the heart to get rid of. The lake house started feeling less like a place for adventure and more like a place of memories. But as time went on, it became harder for us to visit. Between my studies and my parents' work schedules, we were lucky to squeeze in even one trip a year. My parents didn't want to rent the house out to strangers, fearing that something would happen to our antiques. But then they met him. He was a local veteran, an elderly man who worked as a furniture restorer. My dad bonded with him over his military background, and before we knew it, he had signed a year-long lease to stay at our lake house. The guy was odd, small, hunched over with a rough, greasy beard. His voice was gravelly, and there was something unsettling about the way he stared at people. My sister and I were uneasy about him from the start, but my dad insisted he was trustworthy. Since my parents weren't comfortable leaving the house completely unchecked, they arranged for the landscapers to stop by regularly to maintain the property. These workers would occasionally check in on the tenant and report back. Everything seemed fine, until it wasn't. After several months, the landscapers began telling my mom strange things. They said the old man would often sit on the porch, watching the children playing by the lake. He wouldn't say anything, just sit there, staring. They also hinted at other disturbing behavior, things I don't even want to repeat. My mom was horrified. She begged my dad to evict him, but my dad, always the rational one, said they had no real proof of wrongdoing. He's an old man, my dad argued. Maybe he's just lonely. But my mom wouldn't let it go. She kept pushing until finally, when the lease was up, my dad decided not to renew it. He tried to break the news gently, telling the man that the house needed maintenance and would be unlivable for a few months. The old man didn't argue. He packed up his things and left without any trouble. My mom was relieved. She even paid the landscapers extra to make sure he moved out completely. We didn't think much about him after that. Life moved on, and we didn't visit the lake house for a while. But then, a year later, my sister graduated from college, and my parents decided to celebrate by taking a summer trip back to the lake. When we arrived, it was nearly sunset. We had planned to grab dinner in town before unpacking, so we left our new dog, a black Labrador mix named Bear, inside the house. Before we left, I noticed Bear was acting strange. Ears perked up, pacing back and forth, restless. I figured he was just anxious from the long car ride and brushed it off. We were only gone for an hour. When we returned, the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Something was off. Before I could say anything, my sister let out a scream. Bear was sprawled at the foot of the stairs, panting heavily. Beneath him, a smear of blood stained the wooden floor. My mom immediately reached for her phone to call 911. My dad, without saying a word, walked into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. I followed his lead. Together, we silently searched the house for an intruder. By the time we reached the second floor, my dad suddenly stopped in his tracks. He pointed upward. The attic hatch was open. Not wide open, just cracked. But through the small gap, we could see a dim light flickering inside. My heart pounded. I wanted to run, but my dad didn't hesitate. He grabbed the ladder, yanked the hatch fully open, and climbed up. I stayed frozen at the bottom of the stairs, gripping my knife. I expected to hear a struggle, shouting, something, but there was nothing. A few moments later, my dad climbed back down, his face pale but eerily calm. He turned to me and whispered, "It's him." I didn't need to ask who. My mom came running up the stairs, and when she realized what was happening, she started screaming. The police were already on their way, so all we could do was wait. When they arrived, they climbed up into the attic and dragged him down. He looked terrible, frail, unkempt, with a wild look in his eyes. But that wasn't the worst part. They found our house key in his pocket. My mom was furious. My dad had promised her that he had changed the locks when the tenant left. Somehow, the man had been living in our attic for months without us knowing. Bear survived, but he had deep cuts, wounds that suggested he had fought to protect the house. Even after all of this, my dad refused to press charges. He said the old man had nowhere to go, that he was just desperate. This led to one of the biggest fights my parents had ever had. We haven't been back to the lake house since. And honestly, I don't think I ever want to.